Thank you all for being here this afternoon for the last program in the Design Miami Talks for 2023. We have an exciting program this afternoon with three incredible creative people. I'm Marianne Lamonaca. Currently, I'm the program director for the Humanities Edge at Florida International University here in Miami. But I'm also a curator, and I'm really pleased to be here with our panelists. Someone in the audience asked how long the panel will be, in case you're wondering. We're scheduled to be here until 4:45, and the plan is to do a Q&A probably with sort of 20 minutes to spare at the end of the program. But right now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and each will present a project that they're here to talk about. So to my left, immediate left, is Rene Gonzalez, principal architect at Rene Gonzalez Associates here in Miami Beach. And he'll be speaking about a house he designed a few steps from the convention center, in fact, which he calls Not the Little House on the Prairie. And that book that was recently produced has an introduction by Charles Renfro, who's here, seated in the center. And Charles is an architect with Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro in New York. He's been part of the firm as a partner since the early 2000s, and we're pleased to have him here to speak about the Blue Dream House in East Hampton, Long Island. And our panelist on the far right is Nathaniel Furman, who is a creative artist and designer, also trained architect, who's here to speak about a project that he produced along with an associate in the UK called Queer Spaces. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to an interesting conversation. Thank you, Rene, if you want to start. I should say that the slides are just scrolling, and you'll see as they go by. Right now we're looking at Charles's project, but we'll eventually get back to Rene's. Thank you.
So can everyone hear okay? I from my end, I hear like a lot of background noise. So hopefully you can hear me in the back. Good? Yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up. Okay, cool. First, I want to thank Design Miami, not only for inviting us to this panel, but for having a panel about this subject, right? It's not by any means taboo or any shit like that, but it's something that is significant to a lot of us and important. And it's amazing that they have really been excited about having a panel on queer space and queer architecture. And I think that's actually a reflection of Anna Karnick. I don't know if Anna is here yet, but Anna is, I'm not sure of her title, and I don't want to screw it up, but she's the curatorial director for Design Miami this year, and she is just a powerhouse. She's been so thoughtful and amazing at putting together not only the show but the panels, and I thank her dearly for having us here and for highlighting this topic. And then there's Grella, who is here in the background. Thank you, Grella, for supporting us and for your incredible work this year. And Jen Roberts, who I don't think is here. So, and thank you all for coming and being a part of this. So this panel came, I guess I was asked to speak first because this panel came about really, and I'll explain that for a moment, because there is a new bilingual publication that Arquine just published, which is this book on a house we've done called The Prairie House, and those are the images you see that are flashing in the background. And so Arquine publishes this book in Spanish and English, and I asked my friend Charles to write an essay. And of course, no surprise to me, or it should have been no surprise to me, that Charles writes me and says, I think my essay is going to be about gaps. And I said, okay, well, that's cool, like right away, you know? And so the next thing I read the essay, and it's really about gaps, and it's really about how he sees the house as a depiction of gay architecture and a new way to think about space that is really about queer space. It was a surprise to me. But no, like I said, it was a surprise, but at the same time, it shouldn't have been because Charles is very provocative. This is the house that's up behind us. And so I thought, about this, and I'll read you the back cover of the book, and if you don't have the book, it's available on Amazon, and I don't get any money from it, so it's more about whether you'd like to get it. And so Charles writes, is this blown-up modernism a house made of fragments and gaps, also a new gay architecture? If so, it is but one of the many ways this compact, complex house performs, one that in so many ways pulls modernism forward into a brave new world of sensuality, sexuality, and lifestyle. Within it, social progress has found a new architecture. So thank you for those words, Charles. I mean, I think it hit me that maybe I had done something that I didn't intend to do. And I wondered, I wondered about this. Is it really, did I really make gay architecture? What is gay architecture? And generally in my practice, as I know it is the case in Charles's practice, because we've worked together, I start out with an idea and a focus and a clear, driven path, and that takes me through the project. Well, I have a confession to make. Never did I decide at any point in time that I was going to go out and make gay architecture. So the focus of the Prairie House was not about queer space or queer architecture. The focus of the Prairie House was to amplify the potential that architecture has to be experiential and to be sensual and to be felt. Now, so then I thought, well, why did it happen? Why did Charles, who I have an enormous amount of respect, see this in something that was not set out to be intentionally made that way? And I think there's two things specifically that I thought back about. One is that it was the perfect storm. My client, who I know intimately, is a gay man. And I'm a gay man. And I designed a house essentially for him, almost as if I would have designed it for myself. And so I thought about all kinds of scenarios, experiential scenarios, the way that we live, the way that we party, the way that we move around, and the way that we like to experience things, as if it was for myself. And so maybe the fact that I don't consider myself, and Adam is probably amongst us, the most academic, I think, of all of us sitting here in terms of queer space, but I never considered myself as a queer space architect. I have an expertise in architecture, and I'm a gay man, so I mean, I guess that could push me in that direction. But really, I think the idea that I was doing something for someone I was very close to at the time, and I designed something as if it was for myself with an incredible amount of love and energy, produced something that was very gay. There was something else I wrote very early on in my sketchbook. I wrote the term sexy monastery. Obviously, a little bit of a contradiction there. But, the idea that monastically you would want something very sensual, very tactile, very experiential, and that sexuality and sensuality are kind of the same, right? Like you want to experience those things. So in this house, there are many spaces and conditions that you could see as monastic, or I think you could see as sexual. There's glimpses of the master, glimpses of the tubs from the bedrooms, and then from the tubs. So I always imagine somebody laying naked in the tubs of the bathrooms, looking into the other guest bedrooms and looking into the master. Like there's a straight shot where you could if there were 4 people taking a bath, you could easily
We can fill in.
and there's a number of things like that, right? There's like a shower in the master. Here it is, right up in the screen. That's all glass and mirrored, and there's a stair behind it that leads to the roof, and so the whole master bedroom is exposed to those guests that are going invited to the roof, etc. So anyway, there's a lot of qualities here that I, thanks to Charles, realized almost after the fact that are very sensual, very sexual, and very gay. So I'll just read 2 more things from Charles's essay, and I think it's one of the most wonderful things in the book. I was very lucky because Charles wrote one essay which takes this direction, and another friend wrote another essay. And I should also recognize Mauricio del Valle, who's the landscape designer, who's here, I think, and he did an amazing, there he is waving, a little clap for Mauricio. So I'll close my comments by just a couple of things that are in Charles's essay. He talks about the retractable stairs being like a steel and cable velvet rope, inviting only those on the guest list if it were a club or a circuit party. And since the entrance has no roof, he describes and would like to think that new arrivals, and I assume, Charles, that he was thinking of hot guys buff and with little clothes, being baptized by rain as a kind of sensuous hazing ritual.
Or other liquids.
Yeah. So the other thing he states is that the house doesn't so much put the owner on display, rather it becomes a protagonist in his life. At times assertive, at times subtle, but always exuding a calm confidence which would seem to mirror his self-assurance. The house designed by a gay man, me, is itself corporal. Its spatial moves are performative and interactive, contributing to its sensual and playful occupation. And a beach house, after all, is a place of retreat where the body is to be indulged.
That was a nice comment. I forgot. I wrote that.
Charles, if you want to add something about that now, or we wait until after we all get the chance to speak.
I'll just say it was really a joy to dive into that house and to really try to psychoanalyze it. I mean, that's where that came from, a sort of psychoanalysis. I mean, of course, there's Paul Rudolph's Beekman townhouse, which in a way was a precursor to your house. I think your house really pushed a lot of things in different ways. But the whole peekaboo bathtub, and he also was a champion of the reveal. But anyway, I'll just introduce myself a little tiny bit. I don't need to spend a lot of time, but I will say that I participated in the 1994 show Queer Space at the Storefront for Art and Architecture that was organized by Beatrice Colomina and Henry Urbach and others. And at the time, I said, fuck, there's no such thing as queer space. Queer space is whenever I cruise a guy, it's because it's so. Believe me, this tent is super queer space. I'm shocked there aren't more people here, because whatever. But queer space is what we make of it. It's where we make it, and when we feel comfort and security, I think that's what it is. Feel security and comfort in our own skin. And so that can kind of happen anywhere. So for that show in 1994, my then partner and I basically did something very similar to what Adam, you did in your book, which is we invited a whole bunch of people, gay people, to tell us where their favorite places were, and they did an audio narrative of the experiences they had and what kinds of places they were. And we were trying to make a point, because there are a lot of people who were trying to define queer space as gaps. I mean, basically what I sort of ended up with in your house. But we were trying to make a point that queer space is really literally everywhere. But it's hidden. It's sort of hidden. People don't always see it. The rest of the world doesn't always see it. So there's sort of code of behavior that turns into a queer space. And anyway, the house that you're seeing here was made for a husband and wife client. The wife and I became really dear friends over the course of making the house. And while she is not queer, and that I don't consider the house a queer house, I do think it embodies some of the things that I would consider queer space at this point, which is sort of interiority, vulnerability, comfort, and self-expression in a space. And so, for instance, at that house, every piece of furniture was designed by an artist or an artisan, and most of them were made for the house. And so they were these incredibly, you could say indulgent, but really individualistic expressions of Julie and my collaboration. And it felt quite intimate and kind of queer. And also it was built on 3 Mile Hollow Beach in the background, a 2 Mile Hollow, and it's the gay beach of East Hampton. Anyway, we'll talk about that later if you want. Okay, thanks.
Hey. Hi. I'm Adam. Yeah, you already introduced me. Hello, everyone. First of all, I mean, I should end with this, but buy the book. Just buy it, generally. It's very good. And it's shiny, and it's queer, and sort of, strobe effects on the front. I'm from London, and I am one of the generation that grew up under Section 28, which was a piece of homophobic legislation that was put into the statute book in 1988 actually. They campaigned in 1987 by Margaret Thatcher, which prohibited the promotion of homosexual relationships and falsified family setups. And it actually created a hostile environment where many people like myself were so badly bullied that we were forced out of school because they weren't allowed to discuss the bullying that was happening. And any queer or any gay or lesbian teachers were not able to support the students that they saw being bullied. So I ended up being kicked out of school because of the bullying that happened to me. I also ended up being kicked out of home for a period. And queer spaces saved my life, quite literally. So I ended up doing my A-levels, which are the equivalent of when you're 18, you do those, the big exams when you're 18, in a gay pub, which was called the King Willie, appropriately. I think you use Willie in the same way in the United States as we do in the UK. And so I kind of owe everything in a way to the queer elders who took me on, who taught me that I wasn't disgusting, that my body is not disgusting, and that what I wanted to do with other bodies was not disgusting, and that it wasn't my fault that I was being pushed off the bus or chased out of parties that my friends were out with knives or couldn't go to any of my local pubs. It wasn't my fault. It's like that scene in Good Will Hunting, it's not your fault, and it's like, oh, really? And then you start crying, and then everything's good. And then you go partying in heaven in Soho. But the reason I mention this is that it was extremely formative being, 17 years old on the streets in London, being part of a scene that was wealthy, proud, loud, aesthetically vibrant. So Soho in London in the kind of between 1995 and 2000 was a place of kind of fervid aesthetic innovation. A lot of the things that you think of, as sort of the millennium aesthetics, one of the places where they were kind of evolving was on the nightclub scene, the restaurant scene, the fashion scene, which was revolving around the kind of gay world in central London. I was past that, it was wonderful. And then I went to architecture, and suddenly everyone's crying on the corridors, they're wearing black, they're being told that they have to do drawings with millions and millions and millions of lines that look like alien squid. And you ask, why do I have to draw something that looks like alien squid? And they tell you, because that's technology, and that's good, serious architecture, and it has to be 3D printed. Why slides have to be 3D printed, because that's technology. It's all kind of circuitous. Anyway, I managed to go through architecture school. I'm going to come to the book in a second. This leads up to it. I managed to go through architecture school as somebody who retained a very proud sense of my identity as a kind of queer, also multi-ethnic and multi-religious person who wanted to express themselves, as I had done in political protests, as I had done in my clothes when I was, shagging people in the darkroom in, pop stars. I was proudly expressing my identity spatially through aesthetics. And that's something that was verboten in architecture school. I was at the AA in the 2000s, so it was kind of very dominated by a particular way of working. And I had a lot of queer friends, 5 or 6 gay, mostly male, but some lesbian friends, who ended up either leaving the profession or totally reducing or totally removing their identity from the aesthetics of the work that they were producing in order to be able to get by. And I realized many, many years after leaving architecture school that was because there wasn't a set of references. So as humans, we work by references. Wikipedia, you can't do a page on someone unless they've been cited in an important source. We work by references, shared references, which profession believe or communally believe to be good. And as a queer person, I didn't have any. I had some fantastic, there was a little bit of documentation about, the queer space exhibition, not very much. There's some very complicated postmodern kind of circuitous, impregnable theory, which for a, dyslexic designer, it's not very accessible. But there isn't a section in the library that says these are queer architects, these are queer spaces. And that meant that I was having to refer to, things that were not considered serious by the jurors, and we were laughed at, humiliated, and kind of effectively kicked out. And just because of my experience as a teenager, I wouldn't accept that. So like a dog with a bone, I'd carry on. But my friends wouldn't put up with, they didn't want to have to be laughed at every time they presented their projects. And so the book came out of a desire to create something that was really accessible for a profession where over 50% of people in the United Kingdom are dyslexic. So accessible for architects and designers to have a canon with a whole range of queer spaces from the past 250 years that they can access, published by the Royal Institute of British Architects, so that everyone has to accept that it's serious, and it allows people to then use those references to produce their own queer work. And the kind of, am I going a bit too long? Or is it, okay, and I'm coming to the end. But the way that we structured it was actually really similar to what Charles did with the people that he invited to the exhibition in '94, right? Which was, rather than trying to define queer spaces, which I think we all know certain writers have tried to do, as a formal thing, which freezes it in time and frankly gives it over to one particular group of queer people in one particular geographic location and one cultural context in one moment, to open it up. So we invited 55 contributors to submit spaces from all over the world, and again, trying to remove ourselves from a kind of Eurocentric, North American-centric understanding of queerness, to get people who are ideally under a certain age, so bring in a new kind of generation of writers, and also people who live in the same country as much as possible as the space that is being described. And the idea was to open up the definition of queer spaces, to kind of think about it rather than in a formal way and zooming in, to zoom out and think, what are the kind of things that unite really, really different types of queer spaces, as different as a street protest in Buenos Aires, or I mostly put Argentine examples here, but we have a Hotel Gondolin, which is an organization set up for trans people to live and be educated in Buenos Aires. Also, we have Trans Memory Archive. Really different types of spaces, but then zooming out and thinking, what is it that unites them? Not necessarily clearly defining it, but allowing readers to kind of draw their own conclusions. However, during the conversation, I'm happy to share my conclusions if you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam and Charles and Rene. So in each of your presentations, I think we're all skirting what Adam has said to kind of codify a specific way of thinking about queer space. And I guess for myself, in reading and preparing for today's presentation, I was, thinking, as expansive as possible. So what are we talking about? Sort of non-binary or non-heteronormative, a space that's inclusive. I would say that's, and knowing the Queer Spaces book, that's one of the underlying ideas, that this is a space that can include everyone. And so in thinking about that, I also thought about the opposite of something in terms of being queer in the world and not feeling a part of it, like as Adam mentioned, being bullied, for example, and maybe others felt that way as well. But what about ideas about privacy and creating secure space? Because I see that as something that's really important within the discussion of queer space. Anyone want to jump in there?
I think that with queer spaces, it's about privacy, but it's also about the gap, as Charles well said in his essay. It's also, it's about the reveal. The security part is a different issue for me, and this is such a complex topic. And when we were discussing the panel, I was pretty insistent that we stay on the topic of queer space and queer architecture, because we could talk about politics, we could talk about all kinds of things, but I think, and it's impossible to a certain extent to pull them apart completely, but I think that with space, it's almost the opposite of privacy, right? Like you speak in your essay about the early fire houses, and you speak about the fact that there were shared bathrooms, right, for the guest rooms. So my guest room at my home, where Charles happens to be staying, has its own bathroom. Well, kind of. It's not. It's under construction, but whatever. That's a whole other story. But the point is that I think it's about seeing a glimpse of things, and having spaces that are open and that are bleeding into other spaces, and where you, as in the case of the Prairie House, which was very intentional, that I designed the stair that goes through the roof through the master bedroom. So if you're going to go to the roof of that house where there's a hot tub, there's a deck where you can suntan and you can have a party up there and so forth, you have to effing go through the master bedroom. There's no option. So for me, queer space has a lot to do with that. It has to do with this kind of peekaboo situation, and getting exposed and being exposed, and it's not and it's the opposite, really. I mean, I think the clearest way to say it, it's the opposite of a very traditional home that is a room, and you go from one room to the other to the other.
I mean, I would say, I'm just going to go down, but I think I was also bullied very much in school, and so security and safety was something that you desired. I mean, I dreamed in third grade, that I would design a box that I would live in so that I wouldn't be seen, and there would be a little slot for things to come through, not penises. I was in third grade, thank you. But my homework assignment would go through, and I would be secure in this little, to be safe in this little box. And that was a sort of fantasy I had. And then COVID happened, and I was like, oh wow, this is weird. This is a little like that box, but it's just your house, but it's like you don't see anyone. And I was like, was COVID a queer disease? Well, I don't know. Anyway, I digress. I've had a little bit of spicy tequila. But I would say that it's this sort of really extremity of super security and the the reveal, which allows for the connection, communication, and the danger. Actually, there's something about security and danger, that the two things combined that really supercharge what has been traditionally thought of as a queer space, which is a bathroom cubicle.
And Adam, I was thinking. Oh,
Sorry. I was just going to add something very, very quick before Adam speaks. I was just in Marrakesh last week. Man, it doesn't get any queerer than that, right? Because you're in you're in the Medina, and things are like mysterious, and you're seeing things kind of maybe happening, and then you open a door and you're in another world, but then you're protected, as Charles is describing. So I think that actually, and this just dawned on me as you were talking, I mean, it doesn't get any gayer in terms of space than a city like Marrakesh.
Interesting. Anyway, Adam, I was thinking also, but answer in your own way, but also was thinking in the book there, you mentioned places like gay lesbian centers or trans, places that become home community for people who feel that they don't have that in their other parts of their life.
Yeah, they're so important. They're becoming more important, actually, as sort of hedonistic contexts sort of fade away. But just to kind of zoom out for a second, I guess for me, queer people, the majority of queer people are different from other minority groups in the sense that we don't self-replicate in the same way. So it's quite rare for a queer person to be born into a queer family. If you're, Gujarati, you're born into a Gujarati family, and you can reject the religion, you can reject the culture, but it's there. Your history is there. Queer people are normally born into contexts where a lot of the time, I mean, I know that in certain Western countries we're in a privileged position where we're, very often in the media, but actually in the vast majority of the world, still today, they won't know who they are. They'll be brought up in a context where they are not reflected in their own family. And so like turtles that are, born on the beach, and some of them go off in the wrong direction, get eaten by, or driven over by trucks, and then some of them get eaten by eagles, but occasionally they reach the sea. Queer people sort of we have to find ourselves. We also have to find our community. And actually the first process of finding out who we are, a lot of us don't make it. And I'm thinking about the whole world here, not just the United States and America, and the UK and Australia. A lot of us don't make it, and when we do make it, it's very difficult because mostly there is very little history passed from one generation to the next. You find very often there are quite great splits between, let's say, for instance, my generation, elder millennials, I think we're called, and Generation X. There's actually very often very little communication. There aren't family units in place to pass on that information. So even if we do manage to find ourselves, we can't find our history a lot of the time. It's very, very difficult. In architecture, there was none. Like none. I mean, there's literally like very little. There's the work you did. There's a few books. And I think one of the most powerful things that I understood from every single contributor to this book, and actually there's a whole community that has evolved from us just being over COVID on Zoom the whole time. Actually, there's the LATAM Queer Spaces group. They've had 3 conferences now. I think Mexico City, Cordoba, and I think they're having one in Brazil. But is loneliness. So the fact that a very strong part for a lot of queer people is the desire to escape loneliness, the desire to have a shared history which we can access. And a lot of the ways, going back to the 1750s, to the first example we have, was to create domestic environments, safe spaces, where we could build our own histories. And so what you find in a lot of these interiors is they're about safety, but they're also about creating a place where you're not lonely, where you're creating, through the interior design, a sense of belonging and history, which you often have to construct for yourself. And that's the same for a billionaire German king in the 1860s. It's also the same for a community of trans travesti people in Buenos Aires with absolutely no money, working, living in a squat. They're doing the same thing. So it's the escape from loneliness and the construction of communal belonging, for me, which defines queer spaces wherever they are, whether it's a nightclub or it's an archive.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we turn to audience questions, I want to give each of you a chance to ask each other a question if you would like to do so.
Well, that's a trick question. Speaking of questions. Adam, how old are you? Roundabout. 1041? Oh, just turned 41. Okay. I mean, because I guess my question maybe to everyone sitting up here is generational, and whether there has been a shift in the way we assess what queer space is, but I also wonder about what we want queer space to be. I mean, what is the aspirational? You're not thinking about that because you're not considering it, but you are considering it. And when you ask the questions of your people, there's a historic kind of component to what they have said, but is there an aspirational component? And does the age of the person that's responding, make a difference? I guess is my question maybe to you.
I mean, that's a really pointed for me question, because actually when we started off with this, we weren't really aware of big generational differences, and we came to be more aware of it as the book developed, and then also really aware of it when the book came out. There does seem to be one unifying theme, which everyone can agree on, with whatever the generation, which is we would all prefer to not need queer spaces. I think that comes across everywhere in a way, that because they are very often a function of needing to have a safe space or need to hide what we're doing to one degree or another. But I did find that particularly older gay men had an issue specific, so this is not really about the definition, but it's to do with language. They had an issue with the word queer.
Yes.
And that I wasn't really aware of it, and it's really strong to the point of lost friends. That strong. The word queer is seen by some, because it's absolutely not universal amongst the generation. There's just some within an older generation who see it as being kind of anti-gay in some ways. That the fact that it's an umbrella term that includes gender non-conforming, trans people, lesbians as well, that somehow dilutes the specialness of a particular way of seeing space through the gay lens. And that's something that I wasn't really aware of. And to be honest, I don't understand it fully.
I do.
Okay, do you want to maybe?
No, I mean, I just understand where it comes from, but I'll be quiet. No, but I mean, when I was in ACT UP, I moved to New York in the 80s, and I joined ACT UP, and it was very much a gay organization. And then Queer Nation kind of emerged out of ACT UP, and for a lot of people in the ACT UP movement, Queer Nation, that was I think the start of the queer definition being much broader and much more inclusive. And a lot of the people in ACT UP were like, I'm not queer. I'm a faggot, but I'm not queer. You know what I mean? So, and I also think this is damning to. I know some people have houses out in Fire Island, but I feel like there's a preservationist instinct on Fire Island. Preservationist by the gays to resist the queers. And I don't know. So Terrence and I. Work on a board, and the objective of that board is to sort of essentially to make Fire Island more open to the queer culture, BIPOC, trans artists of all sorts, and we have to work really hard against the traditional older homeowners out there to think more broadly about what it means to have that safe space. That island is a giant safe space. Why can't it be a safe space for everyone? Yeah. So that's yeah. So, but I understand where it comes from. That's all.
Thank you. Can we turn to the audience? So let's turn to the audience. Justin is in the back of the room, and he has a microphone if we have questions. Thank you all.
Love, on the colorful shirt, you look epic. I cannot believe your age. I do not believe it. Here, it's me. So I'm wondering, you mentioned to the left, you mentioned that, queer space, peekaboo spaces, it's not moving from one space to the next space in kind of this isolated way, paraphrasing what you said. Why do you think it is that peekaboo nature of the space characterizes a queer space?
Well, look, I mean, I think that we're talking about different things here, right? Like, I mean, I think Adam's very beautiful documentation of queer spaces throughout the world, and you guys should all get this beautiful book that he's published, or that he's written and authored. Is an example of what we've all experienced, bathhouses, all kinds of places like that. And there's things like that, and then things that are designed, like Beekman Place by Paul Rudolph, who, Charles, thank you for mentioning that. It's like an incredible honor to think that, the Prairie House would be a something that would come after that. By no means do I think that, but thank you. I think there's a difference, right? So, we're talking about spaces that we cruise in, spaces that we inhabit. There's I forgot the name, but there's a bathhouse in your book in Mexico City. What's it called? Finistero. Yeah, and it's right. And I went recently during a Halloween party to a space like that, and it was a Halloween party. I mean, that's not designed, right? It's not intentional to. It's intentional to function as a space for queers and specifically for sexual purposes, but it's not designed as a space to occupy and enjoy on a regular basis, and to have spatial qualities that represent who we are, right? And so I think for me that's the difference. And so the sort of looking from one space to the other and being able to have, to take a bath in a bathtub and see someone else taking a bath in a bathtub and possibly, have kind of some kind of sexual scenario happening is a very different thing. So yeah, and so it's interesting, I think, the way this developed, because I think Adams, as I said at the beginning, I don't consider myself by any means an expert on gay or queer space or architecture. I'm gay, and I'm maybe an expert on queer architecture. I mean, I'm an expert on architecture, not queer architecture. But Adam is, right? So it's a very different thing.
I just want to, add that I don't want to give the impression in any way that there's a contradiction, because within the book, for instance, I would have loved to have many more what I would consider to be queer designs, just like your house. But because, we were trying to do, when you're trying to do so much and there's so little space, and it was a bit like that with the book. We had a whole range of categories of types of space that we wanted to include, and we absolutely wanted to treat them all equally. And if it was up to me, I would have had, half the book with spaces that were designed queerly by queer people that could be analyzed in the way that you've been talking about the house. And in the end, it's kind of down basically just to Alan Bussbaum's studio, which actually sounds like there's a lot of similarities with what you're talking about, the way that he broke down boundaries of privacy there between staff and supervisor, which is not very Me Too friendly, but also with clients. There was a famous thing, though, that I think, didn't they say that you don't trust a client until you've been in bath with them naked? Was, I think, what Alan Bussbaum used to say.
Gosh, that's not my motto, but I like it.
And there is a whole world of queer design, like actual queer design, and one day I really hope to be able to spend much more time talking about that.
Can I just make one comment that appropriation of space made by straight people for purposes that were straight in nature by queer people is a really giant empowerment situation, and I think that's one of the reasons that we as a group, we don't behave in group behavior necessarily, but generally we as a group find some a thrill, empowerment in taking over a space that was not intended to be a queer space.
Other questions from the audience?
That's why my favorite ones tend to be Catholic places.
Yeah.
I want to start by thanking you all. Can you hear me okay? No? Yes? Charles? Yeah. Okay. I want to start by thanking you all and all of us here, obviously, because it takes people to create space, and it takes space to create better people. So my question is very grounding, and it's very, I promise I mean it to be inclusive and not controversial in any way, because I think, Rene, when you answered the question about security from Marianne, what popped into my mind immediately was like, you feel it, right? You feel it. And the good kind of you feel it, obviously. And the kind of feeling that, like, I believe that queer space is like a guiding principle for making better humans in the world, right? Every space can be a queer space. Could be, ideally, a queer space or a whatever space, whatever good humans want to make it. And my question to you is there any kind of confidence boost or mantra or like anything you would whisper in our ears to provide a little bit of that security blanket to keep going out into the world and to keep feeling empowered to reclaim any space that was or was not meant one way or another, but to carry ourselves in that kind of grounding way and provide feelings, right? You said the alien squad, which I thought was brilliant. The technology reference, right? Like lines, line, break the cycle of the technology, right? Like, how can you come to feel and communicate that feeling? Anything there that could, whisper it loudly.
When you say feel, do you mean sort of to create the space?
The first feeling tends to be the last feeling, or like if you can trust yourself, right? Build that channel of trust. And there's like these cycles of the mind and versus the gut feeling and the like, how do you empower people to?
I mean, something that, again, just going through all the different examples because I mean, there's a lot of examples that we weren't able to include. Going through them, there was very often, for a lot of the spaces, the communal ones, the informal ones, a driving or several driving personalities of astounding energy and great style. And when I say style, I don't necessarily mean, clothing or whatever, but they had a way of operating. They have a way of dealing with other people. And what seems to have happened is that those personalities define the structures of the institution, the organization, or just the aesthetics of the nightclub or whatever that happens. And that tends to drive the feeling that you get. They do seem to rely very strongly on the energy and drive of individuals who then kind of, through their gravity well, bring other people around them. I'm not sure if that...
I just wanted to say that sometimes, and some of your slides demonstrate this, queer space is just simply the people you're with. That's, in like that street protest in Buenos Aires, it's like they made queer space by being together, this group, this family of people. So I know we're like skirting the topic because it's a squirrely topic, honestly. It's really a squirrely topic. But it's fascinating to think about it. And someone out here said that queer space is, I think, a precursor for all space. I mean, all space should make everybody feel comfortable and safe. If that's what we're talking about, then that's one of the reasons that we have a panel like this, is to try to understand what it is.
Yes. I wanted to add that one of the case studies in the Queer Spaces book, and this is for Miami folks, was about Copelia in Havana, which I have been there. Have you been there? Anyway, I would love for you to say a little bit about that, because that's about taking over a space.
So, one of the 8 categories I think we had is the symbolic reappropriation of, I mean, use the word symbols a lot, of symbols of patriarchal power, which is something that queer communities seem to do everywhere. They sort of gravitate straight towards the symbol of power and just undermine it by doing naughty things around it. And one of the kind of most amusing examples, also with great architecture, is the world's largest ice cream shop, as you mentioned, Copelia, in the center of Havana, which is this extremely beautiful kind of 1960s Pierluigi Nervi inspired concrete dome. It looks like, it could be built for the Olympics or something. And it's right in the center of the kind of symbolic kind of area of the capital, an area that has government ministries. So it's a kind of symbolic central area. And it was built because Castro saw ice cream after his visits to North America as being a kind of way that he could show that he could bring kind of luxury to the masses. It was a very symbolic move for him. And actually so he built this giant ice cream parlor that was going to have subsidized ice cream for the people of Havana. And actually when it was opened was exactly around the time when the government of Cuba was cracking down on gay men in particular and putting them into concentration camps in some instances. And despite that happening, it ended up becoming in the center, the sort of cruising ground. And all the different flavors of ice cream, I think there were, a lot of flavors of ice cream. The different colors represented different sexual proclivities and desires. And so people had a whole language right under Castro's nose where they would order their ice cream and be like, hey, honey, oh, you're exactly what I want. And apparently, and so that's the kind of lovely example of the kind of thing that we found everywhere. In every city we found this. We also have the Catholic Cathedral in Managua, which similarly became like a total queer space for about 10 years until the Sandinistas cleared it out. And so, it's just a really nice story. Thank you for bringing that up.
What flavor are you?
Oh, I'm vanilla.
Justin, I don't see you. Do we have time for another question here in the front? Colin?
First off, thank you all for some really, really interesting insights. I have a question that sort of takes us back to some of the framing for, especially Adam, your talk about education and the fact that the systems and structures of architectural education haven't really allowed for a kind of inclusive remit. So I'm curious if any of you sort of see a vision for what role institutions like institutions of higher education, architecture programs, design programs, museums, the whole sort of cultural sector. What is the role that you would like to see these types of institutions take on in further kind of expanding or breaking open a very heteropatriarchal canon? And on the flip side, does that come to a point where it's kind of checking boxes, right? Like you're just going down the list and saying, okay, history of modern architecture, week 13, the queer stuff, right? So where is that line for you? Is there room for a kind of institutional life of these ideas? What would you like to see happen in a kind of ideal world?
The last bit? When you laughed, I couldn't hear that.
Oh, just
How would you see that in playing out? What kinds of educational opportunities or within cultural institutions?
I'm probably not the right person to ask because I have a terrible relationship with pretty much all of the major institutions in my home city. And it's because, all I hope for in my head is that it's going to be different for the generation after me and that they'll have a different experience with the institutions. They hold all the power. They decide what is officially considered serious, what is officially considered worthy of getting grants. I set up a charity recently with tiny amounts of money. It's kind of where I put put the kind of extra cream on to support other people in the UK looking to do projects on queer space or queer research within architecture and design, because there's no pots of money at all. And that's ridiculous in 2020. Oh, I don't even know what year it is anymore. I'm getting old, 23. So, they could change everything, but they're not where I'm from. So I don't really know what to say, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Charles or Rene, anything about Rene used to teach.
No, and I have nothing. I have nothing to add to that.
Talk to me in 6 months. I'm teaching a studio at Rice called Towards a Queer Utopia.
Oh, fantastic.
And we're going to be
Bravo.
making, I don't know how it's going to happen, but we're going to make a new utopia in Houston, Texas, which has no zoning. And it's going to be a queer community. Yeah, all that.
Can I just ask, do they still have the John Outram Rice Hall? The John Outram's Rice Hall, the kind of giant, colourful interior for their business school there. That apparently the architecture students were apparently told that they weren't allowed to visit it because it would corrupt their minds.
That's there. Yeah, anyway.
Are we good? I think it's time for us to wrap this conversation up. Well, Rene wants to add one more thing.
Yes, I just wanted, because at the very beginning of the talk, I thanked Anna Karnick for her very thoughtful curatorial effort of this year's Design Miami. And she happens to be sitting here now. So Anna,
Thank you,
please
Anna.
stand and let's finish the talks of Design Miami by thanking Anna.
Thank you all for being here this afternoon. And let's make more queer spaces.